Hi, and welcome to Introduction to Law, and this is the first module. And as you can no doubt see, it is jam-packed full of content. And that's, I guess, one of the strange tensions we have in Introduction to Law is it has a very important job to do in your study, and that is to introduce you to some fundamental concepts around the law and the legal system, to introduce you to university study, to help you make the transition, but to do that as quickly as possible. And one of the key questions that come into designing a unit like this is priority. What do we do first? Because I know you'll be studying 3 other units if you're full-time, where they'll all be expecting that you'll have your skills up and running at the start of the term. So we try to get you up on your feet and working and ready to go as soon as possible, but you have to understand that, at some point we have to decide which is the most important thing to deal with first. So you'll find this course is quite crammed at the front end, but as you hit towards the end, it will become much easier and it'll be a little bit more laid back in terms of having time to think and talk and discuss. There's plenty of time for discussion at the beginning, but we've also got that added extra imperative of getting all those skills and getting that knowledge together. So that will come back to us in the discussion today, and this video will probably be a longer video than I would ordinarily give at the start of a unit, because there is just so much in it. Anyway, don't let that daunt you, don't let that overwhelm you, and I've put a link in Moodle to a very interesting short article on what to do when you're feeling overwhelmed, so I'll flag that now just in case. It has some really useful strategies in there to deal with that and very natural feeling you'll have when you begin studying of, what have I got myself into, what is all of this? So fundamentally, the objective of this first module is to get you started, to get you on your feet, and to give you an opportunity to think about what the important questions you might have to ask in the workshop and in other places about going forward. Now, I will be doing separate videos on assessment, and I'll be doing a separate video on the portfolio. So I won't be covering those here. Those are more useful to be covered separately because those are things you may want to refer to again later on, and you don't want to be scrubbing through a YouTube video trying to find the the particular point you wanted to look at. So I'll keep those separate. But today, what we're talking about is, I guess 2 key issues to begin with. One is, what is the study of law? And the second is really what is study at CQU? And what are some of those things you need to know about those practical everyday things? So let's start with that first question about the study of law. And there are 2 major groups of students in this unit. And those are, of course, law students who are going on to study a Bachelor of Laws, but there are also criminology students who are going on to get the criminology qualifications. And this unit serves both those groups of students. And, of course, both students need to know about the legal system. So it's very convenient to deal with both groups of students here, both in terms of the fundamental ideas of what law is and how it operates, but also in those broader ideas around study and adapting to university life. So we do a bit of both there. So I know some of you are studying in other courses and you're just doing this unit out of interest, or there are people who are high school students who are doing this as their first unit of study at a university. So we have a very broad and diverse range of people here. So it's not just law students. And also, even within those 2 major groups, law and criminology, there's a very diverse range of career paths that those degrees will take you to. So again, if you're a law student, you're not necessarily going to end up working in a law firm or working in courts. In fact, those are the smallest of the career destinations. Criminologists are not necessarily going to be working, around the courts and prisons and policing, although that's where a lot of the focus of that course is. So we've got a diverse lot of students that we're working with in this learning community, and it's a good opportunity to meet people who are studying different things and to get some different ideas. But fundamentally, there is that very difficult question of what law is, and if you're coming into study without a clear idea of what that is, don't worry, because the legal scholars have been debating this forever and will continue to debate it. But I want to make a couple of observations to begin with to frame what we're doing this term. Because there's a lot of mythology around the idea of law. But what law is fundamentally is about the study of regulatory systems that govern society and that particularly govern the exercise of power. So we obviously have different forms of power in society, and a lot of it is political power and lawmaking power. And what the law does is to provide a way of managing and hopefully fairly exercising the power that comes from, say, the political system. And this is the concept of rule of law that you hear quite often. And that is that just because you happen to be elected, a prime minister or a minister or a member of parliament or a senator, that doesn't mean that you have unlimited scope to create laws and to change laws. That there are fundamental legal principles that have to be observed. That the delegation of sovereignty through the electoral process is not absolute. And there are things like rights that have to always be observed, that are fundamental to the system. And the Constitution, which some of you will be studying separately, provides a framework for, regulating some of those rights and those powers. So I know that's probably a high-level theoretical answer to what you hope was a simple question, but law is really about that control of power, and it's a study of systems. It's not a study of necessarily of ideology. It's not necessarily a study of right and wrong, but it's a study of systems and whether they function or they don't function. Ideology, of course, is important, and the idea of justice runs parallel to law, but law and justice are not necessarily as closely related as you might think. So the legal system provides limits to power, and it provides mechanisms to address misuse of power, and ideally it provides fair access to everyone. But those things are all contingent on some sort of social ideas that underpin that legal system, some ideas of what is good society and fundamentally what is justice. So the question of what is justice is another of those things that we'll be exploring throughout this term. And again, it's something that it would be nice to say, it's easy, you just have to look at this and that'll tell you what justice is. But we live in a multicultural society where these ideas are contested and are always evolving and changing. So one of the things about the law being a system, if we think about it as a system rather than an absolute state, is that systems always have a little bit of wiggle room. They always have a little bit of discretion that they need in order to operate. So they're not totalitarian systems. So judges have discretions, police officers have discretions. There are ways of actually making, bureaucrats have discretions. It makes the system function. And this is where an idea of justice becomes very, very important to understanding how law operates, because how we guide those discretions and how we do what is fair and what is best and what's observed community standards and questions like that all depend on us coming to a consensus, a sense of agreement on some of those fundamental issues of justice. Now, we're never going to get 100% agreement on these issues. People's perspectives are always going to mean that they have some different attitudes to what they think justice is. But what we can do is we can move towards consensus. And consensus involves a bit of give and take, and it often involves a bit of, well, I don't entirely agree there, but that's within the limits of what I can accept. And in doing so, I can also accept your values and your approaches. So that's something else that's going to be an important theme throughout the term and throughout your studies, is understanding the law not just as a system, but also those ideas of justice that make it function, and being able to be critical of some of the received ideas of justice that might be out of date or not appropriate for modern society, but also to be self-critical and to think about your own received ideas about what justice is, and think about where they come from, and to be able to evaluate them and to go, I think this one is really important, but this one I've always assumed that this is the way things always are. But looking that other people have perspectives, maybe I'm willing to achieve that sense of consensus, which is something that is very important for that sense of justice that underpins democracy. Okay, enough of the big picture discussion of law and justice for now. We're going to have plenty of time throughout the term to look at those issues again and to look at some of the different opinions and ideas that have evolved over time. Let's look a little bit about what it is to study at CQU and to give you a bit of an idea of the framework that you're studying in and the community that you've now become a part of. First of all, a little bit of jargon, university jargon. A unit or a unit of study is an individual subject, so like this particular unit, and a course is a whole degree, so a Bachelor of Laws or a Bachelor of Criminology is a course. So you'll see us talk about units and courses all the way through. That's just a bit of a heads up that what the difference between those things actually is. You'll get used to it over time. So our justice degrees, which include law and criminology, are offered in a variety of different modes, but they're primarily online. So the law degree is 100% online, and the criminology degree is about 75% online, but we have some students in Rockhampton and some students in Townsville as well. So as a group, students and staff, we're scattered all over Australia. A lot of people in regional centres, but there are people in sort of surprising centres as well. I know Luke and myself are in Melbourne, which certainly means that if you're someone in the area, you can arrange to talk to us face to face from time to time. But most students will be interacting with us and with each other via Zoom and via electronic means, and that's how we can get our course out there across such a wide area. But what it does mean is that you sometimes have to be very careful in terms of looking after yourself and in terms of staying connected, because you don't have the on-campus face-to-face routine each week that other students do. That being said, colleagues who are teaching at more traditional universities are finding that the attendance on campus isn't very high anyway. So it's the same sort of issue, I think, that even a student who's on campus 100% is still facing those challenges of being able to stay engaged and stay motivated in an environment where no one's going to chase you anymore, where you suddenly, frighteningly enough, you are 100% responsible for your own learning. And that's a very difficult transition to make. Something we're here to support you in, and something we're here to discuss, give you tips and advice about. But ultimately, at the end of the day, you're the one that needs to keep an eye on that. You need to keep an eye on your own motivation, and when you need help, you need to come and get help from us, and we're very happy to do that. So because we're fundamentally an online program, we offer what's known as a flipped classroom, and it's a strange term, but it's talking about the traditional learning model where you go to a lecture and then you go away and do some homework, basically, and we're flipping that around. So basically your preparation is something you do in your own time, and the content delivery, so rather than sitting in a lecture hall with 120 people like in the old days, and sort of writing down lecture notes, all that stuff is provided through videos, through your readings, and through the activities you do beforehand, which means that the contact hours that we have, and we don't have a lot of time for contact hours, the time is very valuable. We can actually spend doing things and interacting and actually actively engaged in challenges that mean something to you, rather than listening to someone talk for like you're doing now, which you can do wherever. You can do it while you're doing the washing up, you can do it driving, presumably you're not watching the video while you're driving, but you know what I mean. So that's the format we take. We want to make focus on that workshop time is precious, and we want to make the most of it in being actively engaged. And we know from lots of different studies that learning is something best done actively, but passive learning, just sitting and listening to someone, just reading or whatever, is not very productive. You don't learn very much from that. You get a little bit, you get that baseline learning, but true learning and applied learning you get from actually doing things, from actually actively participating. And again, that's a bit of a pep talk to make sure that you, again, stay active and stay participating throughout the term. And I know everyone has stresses in their life, everyone has commitments, and it can be very tempting. You've had a hard day at work and you just think, don't want to engage. I just want to sort of sit here and listen to this week's lecture. And you can do that from time to time. But you're not really learning anything from doing that. In fact, what you're kind of doing is fooling yourself that you've spent an hour learning, whereas you may not really have achieved very much. So you learn a lot more from being active and doing stuff than from being passive. So our study guides give you some guidance to doing that and to getting started and to what to do to learn in an active way. And the study guides are really your go-to guide for resources and for structure. Now, there's a lot of other information on Moodle, but Moodle, like all learning management systems, it's just crammed with stuff, and it's stuff I have no control over. The university just keeps piling more information in there. And the information design isn't brilliant, I must admit that. And again, it can be very easy to get overwhelmed because there's just so many different blocks in Moodle with all sorts of different information and just hundreds and hundreds of words in there. So we try and use the study guides as our baseline to what we think you should be doing when you're studying, and then you can go deeper into Moodle from week to week. Now, the study guides are all there in Moodle. The videos will be uploaded the week before, and some people say, well, why don't you do all the videos at the start? I want to have everything at the start. But the point of having these videos week to week is that we can respond to feedback, and we can get take a bit of the temperature of the room and see what people need to focus on, or what we need to go over again, or things we need to emphasize. So that's why we record these videos fresh each week, and we don't deliver them like a Netflix series at the start of term to work through in your own time, because these are really important in terms of working with feedback, which we will be asking you for feedback throughout the term, and integrating that into what we do. So your study guides are your go-to guide. Moodle's got lots of extra information there and reference out to university policies as well, but start with your study guides. Now, you prepare for each week through those study guides, and then there is a workshop session, which is the face-to-face session each week. There are 2 sessions offered in Introduction to Law. There's an evening session, which is fundamentally aimed at the law students, and a daytime session that is fundamentally aimed at the criminology students, and is also connected to the ISL, the Internet Connected Lecture Theatres on campus in Rockhampton and Townsville. So I won't be in the lecture theatre. Obviously, I'm going to be in Melbourne, but I'll be running the daytime sessions, and I'll be those will be connected to those spaces. And you can also engage via Zoom. So you've got lots of choices for the daytime session, and you can talk through Zoom. You can ask questions. You can do all those things. So Luke will be running the evening sessions for the law students, and that will purely be by Zoom. There's no physical component to that as well. Don't worry, you'll get used to it. The important thing is make sure you set out your schedule each week and do your best to attend. We're not checking a roll or anything like that, but it's important that you attend a good number of the sessions, and we do record them as well. But there's a real trap in recorded lectures, because people go, oh, I love recorded lectures because I can watch them in my own time. Now, we have the logs of what people do, and what we find is people never watch recorded lectures. There's a very small number of people who do, and they tend to be the diligent people who come along each week and they've just missed one. But for a lot of people who have the good intentions to, I'll catch up on those lectures later, they get to the last week and they've got something like 7 or 8 weeks of backlog in the recorded lectures or recorded workshops. So yes, the recording does give you flexibility, and in theory allows you to organise your time, but be very aware that the road to hell is paved with good intentions, and an awful lot of people really, 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 really intend on getting back to those recordings, but seldom do. And at least if you try to make as many of the synchronous sessions as you can, you will actually get more done than if you just rely on your ability to catch up later on. Because life is life, and you very seldom have a quiet time to catch up, even if we'd really like to have that. Now, there is a small difference between the 2 sessions in terms of time. The evening sessions are scheduled for an hour. The daytime sessions are scheduled in those classrooms for 2 hours. Now, that doesn't mean that the criminology students are getting extra bonus content, or necessarily that you need to attend one or the other of those groups depending on what you're studying either. That's not necessarily, you can go to either of them, but I just recommend you go to the one that's aligned to your study area. So yeah, there's an extra hour that's scheduled for the daytime session. That's purely because the criminology workshops are scheduled for 2 hours. The law ones are scheduled for an hour because it's hard to find time in the evenings. Effectively, what that means is we've got a little more time during the daytime sessions to cover things, and we also have some classroom contact time for people who want to talk about things as well. So the extra hour of the daytime group is more of a drop-in session, and generally speaking, the first hour will be pretty much the same as what the evening students do, but you'll have that extra latitude at the end to talk to me and talk to other students as well. So that's the fundamental difference between them. Now, as always, if you need help, ask for help. I'm the unit coordinator. Luke is also my colleague and co-lecturer in this unit. We are both available for help and discussions, and we'll both let you know through Moodle how you need to what you need to do to make appointments to see us. I have a Google Calendar set up where I just put in my available times each week, and you can go through there and find a time that's suitable for you. I'm the head of the criminology program as well, so my time is very changeable from week to week. So it's more difficult for me to say I'll always have these time slots set aside. Plus, I think it's useful to have a variety of times from weeks to weeks because different students have different needs of access. So hopefully the fact that my times move around will make it easier for you to find a time that suits you. There's also the Academic Study Centre, and I really recommend you talk to them for help. A lot of people don't, and they offer things like the Studiosity one-on-one mentoring system that they do online. There's a lot of good services there. They're not really in all that much demand, surprisingly enough. So, don't be afraid to ask for help and to get some assistance there, because, it's being offered and it's for free, so you might as well take advantage of it. Okay, so this is going on quite long as a video. I apologise to you all, but I will ensure that they are much shorter and snappier in future weeks. And we know from our online metadata that most people only watch 7 minutes of videos, so I'm sure I've lost a lot of people already, but please hang in there. We're in the final stretch. All right, so did I have anything else to say about the format? Only that it's important that you prepare beforehand. You don't need to have 100% written out answers to the questions each week or anything like that, but give it some thought and jot down some notes before each time. Don't wait until the classroom to be the first time you think about it, because again, it's that issue about active learning. Being actively involved is much better for you. I'm not. It makes no difference to me if I just sit and listen to the sound of my own voice in these sessions, but it does make a huge difference to you if you're prepared and engaged. The other things I had to say is that we will put feedback activities each week just to keep information coming back the other way. There's a student survey at the end of term, but that's too late to ask for help, really. So what we would like to do is offer these little surveys each week. They're completely anonymous, but please be polite. Please be respectful. No one likes a troll, not even other trolls. But the information's anonymous, so we're not checking up on your particular answers to the questions. We're aggregating over 100 or so students and getting the overall picture. So we'll ask you different things each week, but often what we'll be asking you is, what's the most difficult concept this week? What would you like more information on? And that's a way of us getting that feedback back each week and developing what we do as we go. So that's very important to respond to those and to tell us what you think. The other point I've noted on my notes here to mention is, and we'll talk about this again, but assessment at university is self-structured. Your time management is very, very important. We're going to talk a little later about time management skills, but no one is going to chase you for an assignment. No one's going to chase you to make sure you get your assessment done. No one's going to chase you to make sure you're doing your regular reading and preparation each week. And that's one of those big changes to university, is that you are so self-reliant on being able to plan and do those things for yourself. So we're here again to try and give you support and to give you ideas and to help you out through that process. And we acknowledge that it's quite difficult, particularly if you've come from a very structured environment where people are constantly chasing you up and making sure that you're working and making sure that you're doing things, and it can seem quite alienating. But if you get involved, you get engaged, you keep up with the discussion, it gets better, and you actually get involved in that community, and you actually find yourself feeling a lot better about your studies and what you do, and feeling less alone. And that's really important. Even if you're someone who is fundamentally a bit of a loner and likes doing things by yourself, it is important to touch base from time to time with that community. All right, just a couple of notes on this week's material. It's taken us a long time to get to this week's material. First of all, you might look at the list of the readings for this week and feel a little bit stunned that there's like 3 chapters of the book this week. Those are very, very introductory chapters. And what we find is that almost all law students and the vast majority of criminology students have done legal studies before, usually at high school. And that, again, can create a little bit of a problem because people who haven't done those studies do need the foundation material, but people who have done it before can get bored if we spend too much of the early part of the course just going through, yeah, we did that in legal studies, we did that in legal studies before. So the first 3 chapters of the book are really something you can skim over, and really what you want to be able to do is just highlight things where you didn't know it. So stuff you already know, yeah, okay, I knew that, yeah, that's a reminder, that's useful, whatever. But what you really want to hit is like, okay, that stuff, I didn't know that, and to make a note of it. And this brings up a broader issue around academic reading, and I've done a separate video on that again, how to read academically. But to cut to the chase, you don't read at university in the same way that you read, say, a book for leisure, or even necessarily when you've studied previously at school, where you start at the beginning and you work your way through and you get to the end. Now, fortunately, some textbooks will help you, are designed for you to read in that way, but most of the primary sources, the research articles, the legislation, the cases, are not designed to be read in that straightforward way that a textbook is. And a lot of those sources are non-linear. And if you start taking a piece of legislation, you start on page 1 and you just start working through it page by page for a 400-page piece of legislation, you're not going to get very far very quickly. So academic reading is all about skimming through on a first pass and then building a map of what the content is, and then developing a strategy for where you need to go back and look in more focus. As I said, there's another video on that talks a little bit more about those skills. But when you come to reading those 3 chapters for this week, you're not going to get a quiz on, where does the Court of Appeal lie from the Supreme Court of Western Australia, a single bench judge, or, answer this in a quiz. You're not going to get that kind of detailed assessment. Assessment's quite different. You need to have an overview of that, and you need to be able to look at the big picture, understand the big picture, and then go back and focus. And those skills are going to be important from week to week, and that's something we're going to look at developing as a skill throughout this term. And one of the places where a lot of students do fall down in legal studies, and as university studies generally, is they get very frustrated because they read in that very straightforward, it's the way we got taught to read, that straightforward linear style. Start at the beginning and keep reading till you don't understand something. And what you need to be able to do is become a power reader, and to be able to, do multiple reads through a document at different levels, and be able to understand the structure of something, and to be very active in developing a strategy as to, well, where do I need to go back? What do I need to focus on? What external information do I need to bring in to make sense of this particular thing? Again, more to talk about later, but for this week, there's those 3 chapters. Power through them. Identify areas where you need to go back and look in detail, and identify areas where you might need more help, and ask for, well, can you give us more information about this, or whatever. You've also been set a couple of other, several other readings that will take you through this first part of the term. One of those is an introduction to portfolios, and we'll talk about that in the assessment video. Again, you don't have to read that right at the start, but you'll need to read that in the first few weeks. and the other is a legal research primer. And that's one of those topics that's very difficult to place and prioritize in an introduction to law subject, because in some ways you need to have, the first thing you need to do is legal research. You need to be able to understand what the different documents are, how you can access them, because you'll be studying other subjects, particularly the law students. You'll be studying other units that will require you to be able to do that. However, that doesn't make sense until you've covered the basics of what the legal system is and what those legal sources are and how they were used. So we actually postponed the discussion of legal research in depth to a little further into the term. But what I've done instead is provide something that's called the Legal Research Primer. And that's just to get you started, and that's to give you some basic information. It's written in a kind of an approachable, friendly style, I hope, but it's just decided to give you the really basics to make that bridge until we can come back later and look at those in depth. So again, that's not something you need to read straight away, but it's something you'll need to read over the first few weeks to understand it. All right, we're hitting the end of the run here. I've introduced the portfolio guide, the primer. This week's workshop exercises are really about the basics of the legal system, and they're questions that there's not really a right or wrong answer to, and they're more to get the discussion going. Particularly the last question, which is really about thinking about those big issues of law and society. So they're there for us to have a conversation in the first workshop. So as usual, make some notes, have some thoughts about it, but don't go into that thinking, there's a right answer to this question, and I've got to have the right answer, and if I don't have the right answer, I'm going to look, really bad if I have the wrong answer. It's not that sort of set of questions at all. This is really a set of questions to get you thinking about those big themes and to get you thinking about those ideas going forward. And then, of course, on Moodle, won't be straight away, but definitely by the time the workshop happens, there'll be that feedback link. And for the first set of feedback, we're really interested in finding out a little bit more about you. Where are you? Why are you studying what you're studying? What do you hope to get out of this unit? But there'll also be an opportunity for you to highlight anything that you think needs more discussion, so that for next week we can put more focus on that, and we can put more in the video about something where we find that a number of students say, well, can you give us more information about that? So that's probably going to be the longest video I'm going to do. I tend to prefer to do several videos rather than one long video if there are more topics to discuss, but week one there's a lot of that foundation to get through. So as always, welcome. Always stay engaged and ask for help when you need it, and I think we're going to have a really interesting term ahead of us.